All right, guys, I got an exciting one here for you today. We are talking about the weirdest fantasy football consensus rankings for 2022. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm looking at a bunch of rankings here, and they don't make sense to me. And from a logical mind, a winning mind, a lion mindset mind, these consensus make no sense. I'm going to deep dive into how they are super weird. Give you an example. Tua ranked 17th amongst quarterbacks, yet his wide receivers are ranked amongst the top wide receivers in Waddle and Tyreek. I want to discuss this because if Tyreek's going to finish on top, Tua should do pretty darn good, shouldn't he? Yet he's going undrafted in many leagues. So I want to break down some weird scenarios, some logic, some common sense that doesn't make sense to me, but makes sense to the sheep. And I'm going to break that down here for you guys. Super exciting, super interesting, super weird show here for you guys. When we're talking fantasy football, it's going to be an exciting one. Buckle up, strap in. Now, if you are new to the channel, guys, I see a lot of people are actually watching the videos, but not everybody's subscribed. Everybody's subscribed. Thank you, guys. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. Like the video and tell me something that doesn't make sense to you guys for this fantasy football season. We're going to dive into so many things, guys, that is going to give you guys like, wow, common sense ain't that common anymore. I'm going to break it down here for you as we walk through the consensus rankings together. Super excited to dive in. Now, if you guys want common sense, 16 rounds, guys, if you actually want to win your leagues, rankings are dead. Draft kits are dead. Get the 16-round draft solution. Use code TUBE20. That's TUBE 20. Save yourself 20%, guys. This is going to help you guys crush your leagues. Video training, optimal players drafted each round. I walk through mock drafts with you guys, like having me at the draft with you. Dive into the video training right now, guys, with the notes that are updated up until the season starts. Get 16 rounds at thefantasyfootballcounselor.com, or I've linked it here below on YouTube. Use code TUBE20. Save yourself 20%. This is the game changer. All right. Let's go. Let's dive into weird consensus rankings, weirdest rankings for this year. Just weird stuff for fantasy football 2022. And let's dive off with that first example here. Dive in with that. Tua sitting 17th on the consensus rankings. And I look at wide receivers here. Yet you look at guys like Tyreek Hill, who's sitting 7th on the rankings last year, and Waddle sitting 15th in PPR amongst the rankings. These guys are being promoted super high by the consensus this year. Why? Because I'll tell you why. And this is what blows my mind, guys, when it comes to rankings. Last year, nobody liked Najee Harris. Everybody hated Najee. He was outside the top 10 in all the rankings. Yet this year, they're riding him. He's a top 3 running back, okay? Because everything, well, for the most part, a majority, 90% of the rankings are copied and pasted from last year's. This is why I look at it, I'm like, this looks ridiculous, okay? Because, again, I'm going to give you an example here that looked ridiculous and that was super weird a couple years ago. Godwin had that amazing year. I think it was 2019. Going into the 2020 season, everyone's like, Godwin's got to be a top 10 wide receiver yet again. Even though it was a new offense, Brady came in to spread the ball. And Evans, who is theoretically the wide receiver one, was also in the top 10. I'm like, hold on a second. This is really weird. You have Godwin, who's copied and pasted from last year based on last year's finish, and you guys are forcing in Evans as well as a top 10 wide receiver. Neither one of these guys are going to finish top 10, so I just faded both. Turned out it worked out really, really good for me. It ended up actually that year, I believe it was a 2020 year, Evans finished 11th. He just finished outside the top 10, and Godwin was like 19th. He just busted that year based on his ADP because he was copied and pasted from last year because he finished on top. So like consensus sheeps are like, what do we do here? So I'm looking at the situation. I'm looking at Tyreek Hill. He's sitting 7th. I see Waddle sitting here at 15th. This is super weird. Again, Waddle copied and pasted from last year, obviously. And you look at a guy like Tyreek Hill, he is basically being pasted from last year on 159 targets from last year, and Mahomes being the quarterback. Totally different situation, guys. I look at Waddle. He's the wide receiver one, and he peaked at 141 targets last year. Now, you can say, well, Parker's gone. They've made some other changes, and they're going to force feed Tyreek Hill. Very possible, and Tyreek could finish top 10. So could Waddle. But again, having these guys in the top 10, top 15 together, I think it's a little weird again. And then you have Tua, who's going to be feeding the ball, creating these amazing top 10 wide receivers, top 15, and he's 17th going undrafted. Now in a 12-person league, most people draft one quarterback. He's going undrafted. How? This guy should be a superstar. He should be a top 3 quarterback theoretically, right? That's just weird. Again, I see both Tyreek, and I actually see Waddle could actually finish ahead of Tyreek this year. Very, very weird if you ask me. I don't believe in this. I don't trust this at all. And again, be aware of that, guys, okay? It doesn't make any logical sense. In the comments, dive in with the chat. Does this make sense to you, what I'm saying? Is this kind of weird? Well, you say, no, Joe, it's not weird. Tyreek Hill's a great talent. Both these guys can finish top 10. Nobody wants to, and sometimes quarterbacks, they don't, their receivers may do well, but the quarterback not so well. And I get it. But it's just the fact that, Tua is a bottom feeder according to the rankings, but Tyreek Hill is a god. It's just really, really doesn't make sense to me, all right? And again, Tyreek Hill, I don't see the volume there for him this year. Could be wrong, okay? Something else, and again, I'm just looking at the wide receiver rankings. I'm just trying to see things that really jump out at me that are really weird. And another thing that jumps out at me that's really, really weird is Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. These guys are absolute bottom feeders. I mean, they got Sutton at 21 on the rankings. They got Jeudy at 24th. If you draft one of these guys, you're guaranteed a wide receiver one, okay? I think it's going to be Jeudy based on volume and receptions, maybe touchdowns. It's going to be Sutton. But either way, you've got yourself a Metcalf, who was a top 10 last year, and you've got yourself theoretically a Lockett, but a young Tyler Lockett, who is actually a better route runner and better hands on paper. We don't know yet if he's going to be better, right? On paper, Jeudy was drafted as a top wide receiver coming in. So I'm looking at these guys. I'm like, okay, Tyreek Hill 7, and Waddle is 15th on the rankings. Then you've got Sutton and Jeudy, who are in the 20s, coming off 4th, 5th, 6th round amongst the rankings, right? Where you get Tyreek Hill coming off late first round, early second, sometimes up to late second. And you got Waddle coming off round 3. Okay, so again, this is really weird. I'm looking at it going, okay, well, Denver's actually got the better quarterback in Russell Wilson, right? And here's another weird thing, okay? Now, I like Russell Wilson this year. I think he's going to have a great year as a quarterback. He is sitting, guys, check this out, 10th amongst quarterbacks. So the consensus are okay, well, Russell's going to have this phenomenal year, but his receivers are going to crap to bed. But Tua's going to have a crappy year, and his wide receivers are going to go through the roof. Again, guys, none of this makes sense. And you're saying, well, Joe, it's just consensus rankings. But yeah, this is what people draft off of. This is why 16 rounds the game changer. And I cannot emphasize enough why you have to subscribe and how 16 rounds is winning advice. I'm preaching this, guys. I've had 16 rounds out for 5 years. I've been established since 2015 on Instagram, giving advice that wins. And I see this every year, and my mind is blown on how off the consensus rankings are. Again, last year, I was looking at it. It was super weird. Robert Woods ahead of Cooper Kupp. I'm like, no, guys, Cooper Kupp is the one. Draft Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp finished on top. Last year, Deebo Samuel was on my podcast. I said Deebo is better than Ayuk. Everyone's like, no, Ayuk is higher on the rankings. I've got magazine right behind me, guys, that can show this. I showed it in a ton of my other videos. Ayuk was ranked ahead of Deebo Samuel. Crazy. Here I am spotting out these weird things again. The mainstream don't know what they're talking about, guys. All of this is BS. Rankings are just a guideline. Let your friends draft on rankings. That won't help them. That's where 16 rounds comes in, where you draft the optimal players. Let's keep going here, guys, with these rankings. And understand, guys, Amon-Ra St. Brown was ranked 60th on the consensus rankings last year. Jamar Chase was 30th on the consensus rankings last year. They don't know what they're talking about, okay? Let's keep going on with weird things that are jumping out at me that are just wow, that's really weird, okay? I'm looking here at the rankings here. This is really weird. I've talked about this before. Christian McCaffrey is number 2 in PPR amongst the running backs. And then you've got Saquon Barkley ranked 13th, and his ADP is climbing. Now, you look at Saquon Barkley, who's hungry in a contract year. Then you look at Christian McCaffrey, who was hurt. Nobody even touched him last year. He tweaked a hamstring. That shows me that he's not prepared physically. If you just run a little route outside and you tweak your hamstring, you're pretty much out for the season. Playing 10 games in the past 2 seasons is Christian McCaffrey. 10 games. All of a sudden, he is a number 2. He's a number 2 running back on a different offense completely different offense that he had 3 years ago with Cam Newton when he was thriving. Guys, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, Christian McCaffrey, you guys love him. Yes, Saquon Barkley, contract year, new head coach who has thrived with guys like Peyton Hillis back in 2010 and Jamal Charles in 2012. He has thrived as an offensive coordinator. Now he's a head coach with the Giants, and I'm looking at this. I'm thinking contract year, improved O-line, focal point of that offense, 2 years removed off the injury. And I'm looking at Saquon Barkley, 13th, and I'm like, man, this is really, really weird because they've got Christian McCaffrey, who's pretty much the entire, exact same situation, no committee, kind of injury prone in the past couple of years, yet you're willing to pay a top 3 pick on McCaffrey but you're scared and of Saquon Barkley, who's coming off in the third round, who's primed, and his career depends on him doing well this year. That's crazy. And what's also crazy is that they've got Aaron Jones. Let's keep talking about weird. Aaron Jones is a top 10 running back in PPR. He's sitting number 9. And the guy's got Dylan there. And Dylan, guys, if you didn't know this, now you know. Dylan outperformed him last year in rushing attempts and rushing yards. So Dylan has taken a huge step up as a running back, yet Aaron Jones is still being promoted as a top 10 running back. Now, I understand that he can be involved in the PPR game, and I understand that this year could be massive for him because of the void with Devontae Adams, but it's still, you've got Dylan to contend with, whereas guys like Zeke Elliott, David Montgomery, and Saquon Barkley don't have anyone else to contend with. I mean, yes, you could say Zeke has Pollard, but Zeke still finished top 7 last year amongst running backs. Now, his attempts have gone down, but he should climb back up a little bit this year as Zeke was dealing with a partially torn PCL last year, which hindered his performance a little bit. So, and still finished top 7. So, again, I'm looking at this. I'm just like, man, Christian McCaffrey 2s, Saquon Barkley 13th. That is really strange to me. It makes zero sense. All right, let's keep going on things that don't make sense to me. And again, we've explained the Sutton situation and the Russell Wilson, how he's top 10. Yet you look at Saquon, or you look at Sutton and Jeudy, they're not ranked high. And then you look at Tua as a bottom feeder. Again, guys, dive into the comments. Let me know some weird scenarios from you, because I'd like to hear your guys' feedback on some weird scenarios, because again, this is really, really strange to me. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's keep ripping through this. Things that don't make sense to me, okay? And again, you look at guys, a lot of rookies coming in that are in a prime position to succeed that are just complete bottom feeders. Let's talk about it right here, okay? I'm looking here, guys, at a guy that's absolutely in a big-time prime position to succeed. Wide receiver 1 right out of the gate, Drake London, ranked 39th on the consensus. How? This is... Guys, again, this gets me going here, okay? I look at a guy, I'm going to give you guys a couple names here that I'm just like, what the hell, okay? Juju, who, again, years to wow us, we're not wowed, is in a competition there with Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman. We don't even know who the wide receiver 1 is there. You got Elijah Moore, who is, again, now going to be fighting for his spot on the Jets, right, as a wide receiver 1 there. You've got Hunter Renfrow. This is what kills me. Check this out. Hunter Renfrow, who's clearly the wide receiver 2 on his team. Clearly the wide receiver 2 on his team. Without a doubt, the wide receiver 2 on his team now. Maybe even wide receiver 3 if you include Waller. Sitting 35th on the consensus rankings, 36th. Then you've got a guy like Drake London. Ultra elite talent. The Falcons invest early draft. What is it? Round 1 draft capital on him. Round 1, round 2. He was like the first wide receiver off the board for them. First pick, whatever. They draft super early on him. There's a void there. There is no other wide receiver 1. Okay. Yeah, he's suspect with Marcus Mariota throwing the ball, but who cares? He's going to get the volume. They've got Kyle Pitts there. I think takes a step up this year, but very expensive in the ADP. But Drake London is a plug and play wide receiver 1 at the time of this recording. Now, they could bring in someone else. Maybe they re-sign Julio Jones for all we know. I don't know. But at the time of this recording, either way, even if they bring in someone else, I think he's a clear-cut wide receiver 1. He's going to get playing time. He's going to be on the field 90+% of the snaps. Okay. Drake London, big-bodied receiver, going to be a goal line or a red zone target. Absolutely love him. Sitting 39th. And again, you've got guys that are clear-cut wide receiver 2 that are really high on the rankings. And again, there's so many guys that are super expensive. Like, I see, this is another weird thing. T. Higgins is at 12. Why is T. Higgins at 12 when there's so many other wide receiver 1s that are still available? Like, even Pittman is ranked below him. Deontay Johnson is ranked below him. Amari Cooper, even though Jacoby Brissett could be throwing the ball to him, is a clear-cut wide receiver 1 who's primed for more volume than T. Higgins. Now you're saying, well, Joe, high-octane offense, Joe Burrow is throwing the ball, Higgins is still going to eat. Very well so, but there is a lot of other wide receiver 1s that you can get later in the draft that will completely outperform T. Higgins, who's slated as the wide receiver 2. Does that make sense? And I see mock drafts, and it's super weird and it's super crazy. I watch mock drafts all the time from the well, not all the time. I tuned in a couple times, okay? Again, because I get so frustrated, but I am monitoring what other channels are doing to some degree to see how bad it really is. And I saw this expert come in, and she ends up drafting T. Higgins in round 2. I think it was round 2 or 3. Either way, I think it was round 2. But what I'm trying to say here is that these guys are so expensive, the Waddles, the Higgins. Now, Waddle and Higgins could finish top 10. But I would think that Jamar Chase and Tyreek Hill would have to go down or see a major significant decline in their volume, attempts, and touchdowns, and receiving yards, and all that fun stuff. I don't see it. I think that's super weird. Again, people still will promote these guys. Like DJ Moore, what has he done over the past couple of years? He sucks, sitting 16th on the consensus rankings. There's so many good guys. Like Adam Thielen. He was on par and could be the wide receiver one to see. Why is Adam Thielen ranked? This makes zero sense to me, guys, when he was on par in touchdowns with Jefferson last year and could have actually beat Jefferson in fantasy points last year. Early on in the season, he was the one. He got hurt near the end of the season, but Thielen could theoretically be the one. He's sitting 33rd on the consensus rankings. 33rd. Okay? Stick with me, all right? Jefferson is number 2. Again, none of this, and again, that's because he got hurt at the end of the season, is being copied and pasted over. There's no logical thinking behind any of this at all whatsoever. Godwin is now sitting 28th, but in 2019, when he had that pinnacle year, everybody loved Godwin. They said Godwin round 1, round 2. All of a sudden, he's chopped liver. Nobody likes Godwin. Again, guys, this is really brutal. Remember DeAndre Hopkins? I know he's facing a suspension, but he's sitting 38th on the consensus rankings. But this is a guy that everybody loved. And I know things change and stuff like that, but that's just wild. Again, this is just an overview on some weird stuff going on here at the wide receiver position. It's unbelievable. Again, another weird thing is I got to make a point of this. Again, to me, this is weird. To you guys, it may not seem that weird. Cooper Kupp last year, again, we talked about this. I was talking about this. Cooper Kupp was ranked below, and I want to repeat this, and I want this to sink in your head, below Robert Woods last year. Now, all of a sudden, he's the number 1 wide receiver. When we know statistically, guys, we know we've seen this happen every single year. We've seen it happen every single year. When a top wide receiver comes out, a top 1 year, and then he fades out the year after. That's what's going to happen with Cooper Kupp. 191 targets. How in the heck is he going to duplicate those numbers where you say, well, Joe, a slight decline, and he'll still be okay? Okay, but still, when we saw, this was the same argument with Michael Thomas years ago, 2019, 2020. I was like, Michael Thomas first round. I'm like, no, just stay away. It's not good. He's not going to end up having a good year. Sure enough, Michael Thomas busted significantly. Now, it wasn't even a slight decline. So the point I'm trying to make is it's really weird that they're just saying, well, because he finished on top last year, he's going to finish on top this year without any factoring in of a decline or regression. Whereas I see like a guy like Jamar Chase could supersede him this year because he only had 128 targets, right? Something like that. So anyway, guys, you got to accommodate guys for the worst case scenarios and scenarios that, you got to anticipate is what I'm saying, not just copy and paste. Take a look at a couple other weird things that are jumping out at me here that we have to be aware of this year that people may not be aware of. Again, guys, sleepers like Kenneth Walker sitting 29th. This guy could clearly be the RB1 there on that team. Guys like Dameon Pierce completely being slept on. He's a plug-and-play running back one potentially there. I mean, the only guy he's got to compete with is Marlon Mack, and he sucked for years. You're looking at, Dameon Pierce as a fantasy football running back sleeper, and check out the top 10 sleepers episode I just did yesterday. Dameon Pierce sitting there at 48th on the running back rankings. And again, people will look at that later and be like, oh my God, I had an RB1 there. I mean, it's just crazy. You got guys like, let me give you an example. Who's sitting ahead of Miles Sanders? I'm not sold on. Kareem Hunt, who's a running back 2 there. Devin Singletary, who sucks, who's going to be like an RB3, RB2 on his team, sitting 31. You got Dameon Pierce upside sitting there at 48. Absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous there. Again, guys, I'm seeing a lot of crazy stuff here. Again, Aaron Jones we talked about. Nick Chubb, this is super weird. They love Nick Chubb in standard. He's top 8 amongst the rankings in consensus. He's top 12 in PPR. Nick Chubb, guys, was a top first-round pick last year, busted significantly on his ADP. Kareem Hunt was banged up last year. With Kareem Hunt healthy, he always outperforms him in PPR. He's going to be a thorn in the side, yet they still love him in top 10. It blows my mind here. Absolutely blows my mind. When you got David Montgomery with no committee, who is, ranked 4 spots below Nick Chubb. Absolutely phenomenal. Another weird thing, Dalvin Cook, top 5 running back here, first round pick, makes zero sense to me. When this is super weird because every time there's a conversation with Dalvin Cook, there's like, oh, I got to get Madison later. Here's some logical common sense for you instead of this weird BS about, I mean, this is total BS. I should call this show BS. Dalvin Cook is going to miss time. It's a matter of which window he's going to miss. Is he going to miss the first 3 games of the season? He gets injured in preseason. Is he going to be injured midseason, or is he going to be injured again in your fantasy football championship? So I'm looking at a guy like Dalvin Cook, and I'm thinking, why is he top 5 knowing that you got to handcuff Madison? Well, here's a thought, guys. And again, I want to say this. How about draft somebody else like a Najee or a Taylor or a Henry or a real RB1 that, you know, there's a chance he could finish the whole season. There's no chance that Dalvin Cook's going to finish the whole season. It's very slim. And get a real running back, and then just get Madison later. And then when Cook goes down, and he will, 100% Cook is going down, then you have 2 RB1s. And then you could trade Madison or something like that. Now you've got some really good trade bait, and you've got more depth at running back instead of drafting Dalvin Cook. Yet he's still top 5. It's absolutely ludicrous. And why is it now that Najee is top 4 in PPR, behind, ahead of Dalvin Cook, ahead of Nick Chubb, ahead of all these guys, when you guys didn't love him last year? You guys didn't love him. Now you're jumping on the Najee train after I told everybody to get him. Again, guys, just super weird stuff going on. None of these rankings make sense to me, and that's why, for me, as a person who studies this daily, none of it makes sense to me. None. I mean, there's a guideline here, and I get it, but again, it just doesn't make sense. Rodgers slipping down to 12. He was a top quarterback last year. He had Adams, crushed it. Again, he lost Adams as top receiver, but again, to have him 12th right now to the top 10 simply because of that, I can make an argument, I guess, with you guys to say, well, yeah, he lost his top receiver. There's a decline imminent, very possible, but again, chop liver because of that. And again, Adams, like I said, I want to talk about this before I go here. Top 4, copied and pasted from last year. Copied and pasted directly from last year. Why? Because he had 169 targets last year with Aaron Rodgers. And now he is sitting there as number 4 based and predicated solely on last year, which is absolutely ludicrous. You are drafting Davante Adams based on last year's situation, which is ludicrous. You have to accommodate the fact, and I've talked about this, and I talked about it at the beginning of the show, with Renfro. Like, again, this is the one I want to hammer home. Davante Adams is the one that really jumps out at me. Renfro peaked at 128 targets last year. He's still there. Waller peaked at 145 targets in his year when he was crushing it as the number 1 receiver in 2020 at 145 targets. Peaked as the number 1 receiver, and he's a tight end in 2020 with Carr. In comes Adams, who demands 169 targets to put the numbers that he needs to put up to finish near the top, which is where he's being ranked as. He's being ranked as a top receiver based on last year. He needed 169 targets to do that, and that amazing report with Aaron Rodgers. He gets a downgrade at quarterback with Carr, and he won't get that volume. Now, there is a chance that Renfro becomes chopped liver, and Waller gets completely ignored, and Adams becomes the wide receiver 1 seeking double coverage, demanding that ball from Carr, and he becomes a top receiver. Very, very possible, but I think that's a huge long shot. I think Davante Adams busts. I don't think he sees anywhere near the targets that he did with the Packers. And not only that, when he sees double coverage, Carr's just going to look Renfro's way because he's got that rapport built up with him. He's going to look Waller's way in the end zone. Again, Adams is going to have some big games. There's no doubt about it. But to finish as a top 4 receiver, which is where he's coming off here, is crazy because they're really ranking him based on last year, which is super, super weird and crazy and BS, okay? Again, none of this makes sense. Again, Higgins, Waddle ahead of other guys. Tyreek Hill copied and pasted. Adams copied and pasted. Cortland Sutton, chop liver. Running backs like Dameon Pierce who are plug-and-play RB1s behind guys like Devin Singletary. We got quarterbacks that are in great positions like Matt Ryan sitting 20th on the consensus because of last year's performance. Again, guys, Matt Ryan's going to have a great year as well. Great O-line, great team, yet they love Pittman, but they hate Matt Ryan. Absolutely crazy. Again, there's no logic in the rankings. I'm debunking this right now, guys. I know this is making sense to you guys. Stick with me. Guys, and this is why I created 16 rounds, because I was tired of this BS. I was tired about this weirdo crap, this consensus ranking. So make sure you guys do get the 16 round draft solution to crush your leagues and avoid all of this week weird crap that's coming up from the consensus. All right, guys, new to the channel, you like what you hear, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, drop a comment below. Let me know what's weird on the rankings that doesn't make sense to you. Love to get your feedback and your information here. Love to hear it, love to get it. All right, guys, subscribe, thumbs up. I appreciate you guys being here. Get 16 rounds. We will talk soon. I'm going to keep that content rolling. I'm out.